You're watching Bread and Roses, a weekly political social magazine that is broadcast in English and Persian via New Channel TV. Hello everyone, I'm Maryam Namazie.
And I'm Fariborz Pooya. In this week's program, we interview Sarah Pearce, social activist and artist, on FGM and secularism.
Yeah, it's a brilliant interview. We'll also be talking about the recent terrorist attacks in Iraq and Pakistan, Bangladesh and Islam as a state religion, a fatwa against, get ready for this, cartoons, and a village in Iraqi Kurdistan that has eradicated FGM. Stay with us. In the week that passed, we've heard of 2 further terrorist attacks against people following the terrorist attack in Brussels. One is, of course, in Iskandariya, Iraq, where a children's football match was targeted. There were 32 killed. 17 of them were between the ages of 10 to 16. It was targeting Shia Muslims. And in Pakistan, of course, in Lahore Park, we know that they attacked a children's park where there were 70 killed, 300 injured, many of them children. They were targeting Christians, but of course Muslims have been killed as well, and that's exactly what they do. They target people indiscriminately. They don't need excuses. They just want to kill.
And that's the nature of fascism of 21st century.
Definitely.
Indiscriminate sort of killing. And it doesn't matter as long as you disagree with them. For them, it doesn't matter as long as you disagree with them. You know, you are liable to be eliminated and killed. And this is not just limited to Daesh. Daesh is the ultimate form of this. You'll see that in Iran, for example. Islamic Republic of Iran does that. Just about to, remove the eye of, blind somebody as a form of punishment. Or the leader of the Islamic Republic of Iran, the greatest of the old leader, has said, the future belongs to missiles, not just sort of negotiations, missiles.
Yeah.
And you have Islamists in Pakistan, in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in Iran, in Syria, anywhere. In Europe, you'll see there's no limits. And I think we need to recognize this is pure fascism.
Yeah,
and we need to recognize them as a fascist movement and deal with them as such.
Yeah, and what's interesting is someone had mentioned, that, well, people in Brussels or people in the football stadium hadn't really said that they disagree with the Islamists, but the fact of the matter is that anyone who isn't like them, and they are such a tiny minority really of fascists, anyone who isn't like them is open to be killed, no questions asked. And that's why they target children, young, old, women, men, whatever religion and nationality, including many Muslims, because it's a question of just killing anyone who's not like them.
Absolutely, and I think this recognition of these characteristics, that is a fascist movement, it's a precondition for resolving and dealing with this movement. And everybody must recognize this for what it is, and then the solution is actually like any other fascist movement which has political power and has a lot of influence. The world needs to respond to this, and this is so urgent.
Yeah, it's rather than saying, possibly Charlie Hebdo offended them, that's why they had to kill them. Well, the Bangladeshi bloggers were hacked to death because they were offensive, questioning and criticizing religion. Rather than blaming the victims, when it's recognized that it's a fascist movement, then it becomes very clear that they don't need excuses. So please stop justifying them and also stop appeasing them. It's not just a question of ISIS that's part of the problem, but also other forms of Islamist groups and states, from Saudi Arabia to the Iran regime to the little ones here and there, Boko Haram and so on and so forth.
And I think that's such an important point as a solution. There are a lot of discussion around the world, and experts are discussing how to do this. The best way is to compromise with them. They give an example of the Islamic regime of Iran. That's not a solution. You can't negotiate and try to absorb Islam and Islamism into the the structure of the human society. There needs to be isolated and removed, really.
Yeah, and I just last week I was in Paris with Dia Khan, who's making a film on free expression and atheism in the Middle East, North Africa, and those from Muslim backgrounds, as well as Nadia Al-Fani, who's the Tunisian filmmaker, Maryam, who's an Algerian sociologist, and Walid Al-Husseini, who's a Palestinian atheist. And I think Nadia Al-Fani raised a really important point, and she said that we need to, create this mass peace movement. In the past, they had, these huge movements for peace against, for example, the Vietnam War, and just demanding peace, disarmament, that sort of thing. We need that again. Obviously not the sort of false peace where there's peace in name only, but
negotiation
and compromise, but real peace linked with social justice and linked not to governments but to mass social movements.
Yeah,
I think that's a good point.
I think that point of mass social movement, people need to get angry. People need to be united against this fascism across the world, and it has no boundaries. It's not limited to Europe. It's not limited to Middle East. It's not limited to America. It's everywhere. It needs a global mass movement to say enough is enough, and the Islamists must be defeated. They're fascists, and we need to deal with them as such.
Yeah, and also the reality is that when the focus is only on Europe or only on the West, you fail to see that this is a global movement and it needs a global response and solidarity amongst people across borders and boundaries. And one of the other issues that's key, obviously, is the concept of secularism, something that's often vilified. People are apologetic about it nowadays. It's as if it's shameful to say one is a secularist to some extent. If you promote secularism, you're considered militant and extremist. And in fact, secularism is so key. And one example of this attempt is in Bangladesh, where there was a petition that's very many years old calling for an end to Islam as the state religion. And what's really interesting is how recent this Islam has become the state religion of Bangladesh. I think it's 1988.
In the 80s, that's right. And this is after the rise of the political Islamic movement, after the Iranian sort of revolution was defeated by the Islamists effectively, and they hijacked the result of that revolution and established the Islamic Republic of Iran. You'll see the rise of that movement across Middle East, North Africa, and suddenly Bangladesh becomes an Islamic state. It has constitution. The Supreme Court of Bangladesh, they said that we're not going to consider this. Of course, Islamists sort of drum this as a victory for themselves. But the question remains that, and there are Bangladeshi bloggers and secularists who have said that actually this is not the end of it. We are going to fight to remove Islam as official religion.
It's not an Islamic state, but Islam is the official religion.
That's right.
But obviously that colors everything. And
sure, but I mean, it's a problem, but it is not end of the story, and it needs to be removed.
Definitely. This week we interviewed Sarah Pearce, who is a social activist and artist. She's also founded the Secular Voices Project. We talked to her about FGM, the fight against it, as well as the excuses in its defense, cultural relativism, and the importance of secularism. It's an interesting interview. Stay with us and watch it. Sarah Pearce, welcome to the program. I wanted to ask you about your Secular Voices project. Tell us about it.
So Secular Voices is a campaign by Fireproof Library, and the idea is to collect a range of perspectives from secularists and humanists around the world. So the idea is to enable children to hear from different people, just be able to imagine the possibility of unbelief as an option, because for me, when I was growing up, I wasn't even aware that there was such a thing as being agnostic or being a humanist or being a secularist. And I think it's just a way to open up new ways of thinking and to allow children to explore the world differently.
Especially because children often only hear this religious point of view. It seems to be so dominant now, doesn't it?
Yes, I think indoctrinating children into religion is something that parents just do naturally. I think very few parents consciously make the effort to expose their children to a range of religious perspectives. So I think it's a good way to just open up that world, open up that room for conversation, allow children to ask those questions which they usually can't ask at home or elsewhere.
Given the fact that religion seems to be so dominant, is your promotion of secularism another form of indoctrination, possibly?
I think that in the West now, it's quite funny that secularism is being rejected so viciously, because secularism really is not a threat. I don't see it that way. But in some factions of society, it's been rejected very strongly, on the basis that it imposes a Western worldview, which is untrue, really, because African traditions before Christianity and Islam had animist or non-believing worldviews. So, yeah, I find it funny how secularism and humanism is being rejected, and part of that rejection comes with, Westerners wanting to stay neutral on issues like FGM. So an example of that was what happened at Goldsmiths recently during my seminar, where my lecturer she refused to make to take a stand on FGM, and just said that, well, there's another way of looking at it, that FGM and veiling are responses to colonialism, and that to critique FGM is to go back to humanism and secularism, which informed Western civilization. So Western civilization, just the Western way of life, has just been demonized to such a degree that there's a reactionary movement now to just counter that in any way, shape or form, regardless of the implications. And one of those examples we're seeing is people embracing veiling and FGM, and even just lumping those two things together, because they're not the same. Veiling is not permanent. It doesn't inflict any harm on the body itself. You can always unveil in your private home. But with FGM, it's a lifelong consequences that women have to live with. But somehow anything that is different to the West is championed as better, as more righteous, just because it is different. Because it is different doesn't mean that it is necessarily correct. Of course, there is a danger of people thinking that anything that is different is savage. Yes, I understand that, and I understand that there are people who look down on the ways of other cultures. So it's about finding a reasonable balance in between. So on one hand, we have to we should be able to look at every issue on a case-by-case basis, and not just make sweeping generalizations about issues like FGM. The consequences are far too great.
You call it a betrayal. How can one stay neutral on something like FGM? It's outrageous, really, isn't it?
So for me, coming from Nigeria, I was born in Nigeria. I lived there until I was 15 years old. So I moved to England, thinking that I'm moving into just a more advanced society because everything just works so much better. But then to be in a British university and to be told that to take an anti-FGM stance is to be propagating colonial ways of thinking, I just find quite ridiculous, which is why I described it as a betrayal, because it is a betrayal of women's rights. Human rights should come before anything else. And even if we want to apply degrees of cultural relativism, it shouldn't be on an issue like FGM, because what is at stake is so great, and that's why I felt that I had to speak out. So even though I'm still a student under this lecturer, I might have to face her, to deal with her again. But I think that is so important for me to speak out, which is why I did.
I mean, in a sense, even though this perspective is seen to be anti-racist, there's this underlying racism there, because it sort of says that, well, FGM and, you know, the veil and what have you is just part of our culture. It has to be respected, even though so many people are opposing it.
I think the problem with a lot of anti-racist activism in the UK is that it completely positions itself as the opposite of everything that is traditionally English. So what they do is they just lump all cultures together. So if you're African, you know, you're seen as a different culture that should be respected as opposed to interrogated. So for instance, if you look in the social care system, you know, if a black parent, you know, abuses a black child, they should be, you know, taken up on that. But usually social workers sometimes are a little bit scared to act on this because of the fear of being called racist, and this is playing out in other parts of society, you know. So you get doctors also being a little bit hesitant to report domestic violence when it's Asian women that are involved, but if it's white women, they would flag it up. So I think it is a different type of racism in the sense that because we come from different cultures, they don't want to deal with us in the same way, and in a way they're holding us to a lower standard that isn't right. If they see us as human beings, then they should expect the same from us, and they definitely shouldn't make excuses on our behalf.
I mean, what would you say to people who do that exactly, the effects that it has on you personally, on women's rights in general?
Well, it is holding back our work, you know, it is limiting our achievements, and it can get quite extreme, especially when they try to stifle debates, ban speakers or censor work that has been carried out on these issues for the fear of being labelled racist. I think it is actually quite dangerous, really, for people who are good, who are well-meaning, who mean well, who want to integrate other cultures. But I think that's they just need to listen to women from these cultures, campaigners from those backgrounds who are actually trying to change their culture from within, and allow them to do that, as opposed to trying to fight for them, which really just causes more damage.
How important do you think secularism is in all this?
I think that secularism really is the key. I'll use my country as an example, where 50% of the population are Muslim and the other half are Christian. We do have a small population, about 5% of animists as well. I think that secularism is the key to kind of bringing those communities together. If people can try to understand that religion might be good for them, but it is best practiced in private. So not bringing it into the workplace, into school, indoctrinating children. I think children should be exposed to different worldviews, but I don't think that they should be committed to any particular religions until they're over 16. Because it leads to segregation in society. You know, we tell children from a very, very young age that their religion is right, and they have a right to express that religion anywhere. And then when they grow up and they meet people who disagree with some of those views, they get offended because that's all they've ever known. So it's so important to not restrict children to particular worldviews. And yeah, that's where secularism comes in. So we need more secularism and humanism in schools and elsewhere.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed that interview with Sarah Pearce. I mean, you know, when I heard this whole thing at Goldsmiths University, again Goldsmiths, where she's got a professor talking about how we need to be neutral to issues like the veil and FGM, that it is linked to women's agency, and criticizing it is part of a colonial project. I mean, I think, seriously, they have lost the plot completely.
The termites have spread that far, and you could see
just rotten to the core.
And you could see, this is the nature of sort of post-colonial, supposedly definition of the world, that it meets, its end effectively, that justifies the most reactionary elements in society. and tries to sort of uphold that. This is you'll see that in a lot of universities. Intertextuality, you name it, or the contextualization of the situation. That means, forget about the main topic and try to explain it away. And also, I think that's, you could see this is very closely linked. And the anti-colonialists now, they're meeting the Islamists and they all merge together and it becomes a sort of a bastard child that we could see. That's how he's treating the issue of FGM, veil, and that sort of thing.
Yeah, and to think that, the horrors and tortures of FGM, 125 million women and girls alive today that have been cut, that have been mutilated. And then you have professors sitting at universities in Europe where many girls continue to face these horrors, and having nothing to say about it, nothing critical to say about it, and instead being critical of those who stand up against it as being part of a colonial project. The racism of this perspective that feigns to be anti-racist is so clear.
And you could see why the result of this line of thinking is the Stop the Boer Coalition type of association with Islamist, Galloway type of thing, which is always sort of in bed with the dictators in Middle East and Islamists.
Disgusting.
And that type of sort of politics that the supposedly the colonial sort of people who've historically they've suffered, anything they say it's good and we need to respect that. And any humane critique of that is
even from people who are from those backgrounds, who've suffered those backgrounds. Even them, they've just bought into the anti-colonial, the post-colonial.
Absolutely, but when the voice of that people actually suffering from this and resisting this fascism of today, that the voice is heard, this movement becomes the anti-colonial sort of pro-Islamist movement becomes really reactionary and rotten to the core. Rotten.
Rotten. Mufti Arif Qasmi from the Darul Uloom Deoband, surprisingly, he's given a fatwa, given the fact that we did find a scientific correlation between long names and stupidity. Clearly, it doesn't matter how long your name is. If you issue fatwas, you're just plain stupid. And he's issued a fatwa against cartoons, and he's got this wonderful intellectual reasoning. I think the rationalists of our era would be astounded by these reasonings, and it's very simple.
Philosophers, please sit down, take note, and work out the reasoning. Is mind-boggling.
Cartoon is a picture.
Can I just say, before you go any further, I'm sure his picture is published. I'm sure he's got videos recorded and distributed. But never mind, carry on.
And we've had, our eyes have been seared looking at them. But so 1, cartoon is a picture. 2, it's not for children.
I thought it is for children.
Well, listen,
cartoons are designed for children.
It's not, and he's the intellectual rational. He's rationalizing
the Islamist philosopher.
And 3, it should not be watched. I'm sold completely. When I go home, my 10-year-old son is not going to be watching cartoons anymore.
I'm going to read you my logic. This is crazy.
So we warned you.
Can I just say, I've heard his name before.
Well, you might have, because he's issued many different fatwas, including on women being banned from being receptionists, women wearing jeans, perfume which has alcohol in it, tattoos, and of course waxing from the knees to the navel. Big no-no. Big no-no. Rotten.
Rotten to the core.
Rotten.
It's got against the children this time.
The slice of life this week is from Iraqi Kurdistan, a village called Tutakal, near 3 hours away from Arbil, the capital, where FGM has now been eradicated. Children that are now being born are no longer being mutilated. And it's all as a result of a project between this group called Wadi and UNICEF, where they're providing school services in various villages in return for them eradicating and stopping FGM. And of course, now there are 7 villages in Iraqi Kurdistan where FGMs don't take place anymore. Of course, you know, I understand that this is a post-colonial project and they've internalized colonialism.
Don't mention at Goldsmiths or SOAS.
Yes,
it just doesn't work there.
Yeah.
It messes up the curriculum. I mean, this is a good news, really, in a way that shows the awareness and the social campaign. And mothers and people have said, don't come near my children. If you come, I kill you.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what they've said. And I think this is a brilliant sort of project. And I think everybody should take note.
Yeah. And it's something that they're actually thinking of working with UNICEF to eradicate FGM in that area in the next 5 years. So yes, we need to support them. We need to push forward because it has been banned. FGM has been banned in Iraqi Kurdistan, I think since when was it? Quite a while now. But nonetheless, this is the sort of day-to-day grind that needs to be done in order to organize against it.
Not only legal sort of
persuading
and also being communities involved, getting people together,
Yeah.
and this is a brilliant project and we need to support it.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we've reached the end of our program. Before we go, we do like to tell you that we're going to be away for 2 weeks. I know. It's going to be hard. You're going to have to survive without us. You can watch reruns over and over again. And you know, drink lots of wine and think about how much you miss us and yada yada yada. We'll be back in 2 weeks' time. We'll try to come up with some good ideas.
And we'll try.
Or we might not.
I think we like it the way it is, but we'll have a look. We'll see. If you got any ideas and suggestions about the format of the program,
send it to us. Yeah.
Let us know. We'll be glad to hear them.
Yeah. So have a great 2 weeks, and we will see you when we get back. Until then, bye.
Goodbye.
Hi, I'm Maryam Namazie.
And I'm Fariborz Pooya.
We're hosting a program called Bread and Roses. It's a weekly program that's broadcast in Persian and English in the Middle East and North Africa, primarily Iran as well. And it's also shown on YouTube internationally.
And we've been doing this since last May. We're coming up to our year's anniversary, and we've had quite a lot of fun making these videos.
We discuss taboo-breaking, free-thinking ideas. The Islamic regime of Iran has called us immoral and corrupt.
And that's why you need to support us. We are the alternative voice in Middle East and North Africa.
Of corruption and immorality. So do support us. Here's a short video from Patreon that explains how you can help us with even just $1 a week. That's nothing. Support us.
Patreon lets fans become patrons of their favorite artists and content creators. It's different than Kickstarter because it's not about one big project that requires lots of funding. It's more for bloggers or YouTubers or webcomics, anyone who creates on a regular basis. Here's how it works. When you become a patron, you're agreeing to give an artist a tip of an amount you set every time they release a piece of content, whether it's a new song, a video, or a recipe. You can set a monthly maximum to make sure that you're always within your budget. Choose an amount, enter your payment information, and you're done. Becoming a patron allows you to view and post in the artist's stream, and in exchange for your support, artists offer additional patron packages, which might include monthly Google Hangouts, music production tutorials, pre-sale concert tickets, or anything they can offer as a way to say thanks. Patreon, empowering a new generation of content creators.